The grand hall of the Galactic Council stretched like a cathedral of chrome and crystal. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds sat in tiered seats that curved around the central platform. Their voices created a symphony of clicks, whistles, and electronic hums that filled the massive chamber. At the center stood Ambassador Velcros, his silver scales catching the light as he raised all four of his arms in triumph. 3 years had passed since the Sol incident. 3 years since the human colonies had been reduced to ash and debris. Velcros remembered that day with satisfaction. The humans had been growing too bold, too aggressive. They expanded into territories without permission. They refused to bow to superior civilizations. Something had to be done. The Krelthani Empire had volunteered for the task. Their fleet was powerful and efficient. Velcros himself had commanded the attack from his flagship. He watched through the viewing screens as the human worlds burned. Mars Base 7, Europa Station, the mining colonies on Titan, all gone in a matter of hours. 15 billion souls extinguished like candles in the wind. The humans had tried to fight back. Their primitive warships launched missiles and fired their crude energy weapons. It was like watching children throw rocks at a tank. The Krelthani shields absorbed everything. Then came the response. Plasma cannons tore through the human vessels like paper. Colony domes cracked and vented atmosphere into the void. Cities on Earth's moon became craters of molten glass. The message was clear. Humanity would learn its place or cease to exist. Within a week, the human government on Earth transmitted their surrender. They signed every document the Council demanded. They gave up all claims to space beyond their own moon. They promised to never build warships again. They would stay quiet and obedient. Now, 3 years later, the Council gathered to celebrate. The ceremony was called the Festival of Harmony. Velcros found the name amusing. There was no harmony, only submission. But that was how the galaxy worked. The strong made the rules. The weak followed them or died. The human representatives sat in the lowest tier of seats. There were only 5 of them. They wore simple gray uniforms without decoration. Their faces showed no emotion. Velcros wondered what they were thinking. Did they hate him? Did they dream of revenge? It did not matter. Without their fleets and colonies, humans were nothing. Just another broken species among thousands. The ceremony began with speeches from various council members. They talked about peace and cooperation. They praised the wisdom of the council's decisions. Some of the younger species looked uncomfortable when Velcros spoke about the Sol incident. He called it a necessary correction. A lesson in humility. The older species nodded in agreement. They had learned similar lessons long ago. After the speeches came the signing of new treaties. The humans would pay tribute to the council for the next 100 years. They would provide resources and labor. In return, they would be allowed to exist. One of the human representatives, a woman with gray hair and tired eyes, stood and walked to the platform. Her hand shook as she signed the document. Velcros smiled. This was order. This was how it should be. The celebration continued into the evening. Food and drink flowed freely. Delegates mingled and made deals. The humans left early without saying goodbye. No one noticed or cared. They were irrelevant now. Just another defeated race in the vast tapestry of the galaxy. Far from the council chambers, in a monitoring station on the edge of known space, a junior technician named Thrix watched his screens with growing concern. Thrix was a Viridian, a species known for their attention to detail. His compound eyes could detect patterns that others missed. For the past hour, something had been bothering him. There was an energy signature. It was faint, barely visible against the background radiation of deep space, but it was moving. And it was massive. Thrix ran the calculations 3 times. The object was enormous, larger than any ship in the Council database. It was also heading toward Council space at a steady pace. Thrix reported the anomaly to his supervisor. The supervisor dismissed it as a sensor glitch. Deep space was full of strange readings. It was probably just a rogue asteroid or a cloud of cosmic dust. Thrix should stop wasting time and focus on real threats. Thrix returned to his station, but he could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. He enhanced the image, pushing his equipment to its limits. For just a moment, the object became clear. It was not an asteroid. It was a ship. The largest ship Thrix had ever seen. Its hull was dark and angular, covered in what looked like weapon emplacements. Then the image vanished as the object disappeared from his sensors entirely. Thrix felt his blood run cold. Ships that size did not exist. And ships that could hide from military sensors definitely did not exist. He tried to track it again, but the signature was gone. Whatever it was, it had vanished into the darkness between stars. But Thrix knew it was still out there. Still moving. Still coming. In his luxurious quarters on the council station, Velcro celebrated with his senior officers. They drank Krilthani fire wine and told stories of past victories. The humans were forgotten. The galaxy was at peace. Everything was as it should be. Velcros raised his glass and made a toast to continued prosperity and the strength of the Krilthani Empire. None of them knew that in the darkness of space, something was watching. Something that had been building and waiting for 3 long years. Something that remembered every death, every destroyed colony, every humiliation. The humans had stayed quiet just as the council demanded. But silence did not mean acceptance, and the time for silence was about to end. The disappearances started small. A patrol ship here, a cargo vessel there. The Krilthani Empire controlled hundreds of systems, and ships went missing all the time. Pirates, navigation errors, mechanical failures. It happened. But after 3 months, the pattern became impossible to ignore. 47 ships had vanished without a trace. No distress signals. No debris fields. No survivors. They simply stopped responding to communications and were never seen again. The attacks, if they were attacks, were precise and clean. Military intelligence analyzed the locations and found something disturbing. All the disappearances occurred along the borders of former human territory. Commander Brell stood in the war room of the Krilthani military headquarters. He was a veteran of 30 campaigns and had never seen anything like this. The holographic display showed the missing ship locations as red dots. They formed a pattern almost like a net being drawn tighter. Brell's instincts told him this was no coincidence. He presented his findings to the High Command. Some agreed with his concerns. Others laughed. The humans! Impossible. They had no ships, no technology, no resources. Their military had been destroyed 3 years ago. What remained of humanity lived in poverty on reservation worlds, doing menial labor for their council masters. They were broken, defeated, harmless. On one of those reservation worlds, in a settlement called New Hope, humans lived in prefabricated shelters that leaked when it rained. They worked 12-hour shifts in factories owned by other species. Their children went to schools where they learned that humanity had been arrogant and deserved its punishment. The council representatives watched everything, making sure the humans stayed compliant and defeated. But in the darkness between the shelters, away from the cameras and guards, something else was happening. Small groups gathered in secret. They spoke in whispers about hope and resistance. They passed around forbidden messages that came from somewhere in deep space. The messages contained coordinates and instructions. They said that humanity was not finished. Not yet. The messenger was a woman who never gave her name. She appeared without warning and vanished just as quickly. She moved between settlements like a ghost. Some said she was military, one of the officers who refused to surrender. Others claimed she was just a legend, a story people told themselves to keep hope alive. But the coordinates she provided were real, and they led to supply caches hidden in abandoned stations. 3 years earlier, when the Krilthani fleet attacked, not all of humanity's military surrendered. Admiral Sarah Chen commanded the 3rd Deep Space Fleet, stationed beyond the outer colonies. When she received the surrender order from Earth, she made a choice. She refused. Her crew, 2,000 men and women, voted to follow her. They would not surrender. They would not forget. Chen led her fleet into the deepest parts of space, far beyond the reach of Council sensors. They found abandoned asteroid fields and dead systems where no one ever looked. There, in the darkness and silence, they began to build. Every ship in the fleet was cannibalized for materials. Engineers worked around the clock. Resources were stretched to breaking point. But slowly, something new took shape. It was not just one ship they built. Chen knew one ship would not be enough. They needed a fleet, but humanity had nothing left. So they made do with what they had. 5 ships began to take form in those hidden construction yards. They were ugly, brutal things built from salvage and desperation. But they were also powerful in ways the Council had never imagined. The flagship, which Chen named Reckoning, was the largest. 5 kilometers of pure aggression, powered by experimental antimatter reactors that human scientists had been developing in secret before the war. The weapon systems broke every Council treaty and law. rail cannons that could punch through any known shielding, missile pods carrying warheads that could crack a planet, point defense systems so dense that nothing could get through. The crew called it a flying fortress. Chen called it a promise that humanity would not stay quiet forever, a promise that those who died would be remembered and avenged. Every person aboard had lost someone in the attacks. Parents, children, friends, lovers. They worked with the fury of the bereaved and the determination of the damned. Back in Council space, the disappearances continued. A Krelthani supply convoy vanished while traveling through the outer rim. This time there was a sensor reading, just for a fraction of a second. A massive energy signature appeared and then disappeared. The sensor officer who detected it ran the analysis 17 times, certain there was a mistake. But the data was clear. Something huge had been there. The report reached Commander Brell within hours. He took it directly to the Emperor himself. The Emperor listened but remained unconvinced. Even if the humans had built something which was impossible, they would not dare attack the Krelthani Empire. They had seen what happened to those who opposed the Council. They had watched their worlds burn. No species was that foolish, but the Emperor agreed to increase patrols along the border. More ships were deployed. Sensor arrays were upgraded. If something was out there, they would find it and destroy it. The Krelthani military was the most powerful force in the galaxy. They had crushed countless rebellions. One more would make no difference. On the hidden construction station, Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the reckoning and watched the final systems come online. The ship hummed with power. Around her, the crew worked with quiet efficiency. They were ready. 3 years of work, 3 years of sacrifice, 3 years of preparation. Now it was time. Chen opened a channel to the other 4 ships in her small fleet. Their captains appeared on her screen. Each one had their own story of loss and survival. Each one had chosen to fight rather than surrender. They looked to her for orders, and she did not disappoint them. The first phase was complete. The Krelthani knew something was coming. Now it was time to make them afraid. The message arrived simultaneously on every Krelthani military frequency in known space. It overrode encryption, bypassed firewalls, and burned itself into the memory of every receiver. Communications officers across the Empire stared at their screens in shock. The message was simple and terrifying in its simplicity. A countdown clock, 72 hours. Below it, a set of coordinates pointing to a neutral system on the edge of Council space. Nothing else. No demands. No explanation. Just the clock, ticking down with mechanical precision. The implication was clear. Someone was issuing a challenge. Someone wanted a fight. The Krelthani High Command erupted into chaos. Half the officers insisted it was a human trick, a desperate bluff from a broken species. The other half demanded immediate mobilization. The Emperor called an emergency council session. Representatives from a dozen species gathered to view the message and debate its meaning. Most agreed it had to be the humans. No other species would dare. Commander Brell compiled every piece of intelligence they had. 47 missing ships, 12 destroyed outposts along the border, strange energy signatures detected and lost, rumors from the human settlements about messages from deep space. The pattern was undeniable. The humans had been planning something for 3 years. Now they were ready to reveal it. The Emperor addressed the Council with confidence that he did not entirely feel. The Krelthani Empire would respond to this insult with overwhelming force. The Third Fleet would deploy to the coordinates and deal with whatever pitiful force the humans had assembled. It would be a demonstration of power, a reminder to all species of what happened to those who challenged the Council. The vote was unanimous. The humans would be taught another lesson. The Third Fleet was legendary in Krelthani military history. 200 warships, including 3 massive dreadnoughts, each one capable of destroying a planet. The fleet had crushed rebellions on 17 worlds. It had never been defeated. Fleet Admiral Korvax, a veteran of 40 years, took command personally. He viewed this deployment as a formality, a waste of resources to swat an insect. As the countdown continued, the galaxy watched with mixed feelings. Some species secretly hoped the humans would put up a fight, even if it was futile. They remembered their own defeats at Council hands. Others bet on how quickly the Krelthani would end it. Most agreed it would be over in minutes. The humans had nothing that could threaten a Council fleet. Aboard the Reckoning, Admiral Chen gathered her crew in the main hangar. 2,000 faces looked up at her. faces marked by 3 years of hard work and harder memories. She did not give them a rousing speech. She did not need to. They all knew why they were here. They had all lost everything. Now they would make the galaxy remember that humanity could still bite back. Chen explained the plan with brutal honesty. They were outnumbered 100 to 1. They had no support, no reinforcements, no backup. If they failed, humanity would be erased from history. But if they succeeded, if they could show the galaxy that humans would not stay quiet, then maybe the survivors on the reservation worlds would have hope. Maybe the next generation would have a future. The crew voted. It was unanimous. They would fight. The Reckoning powered up its massive engines and began the journey to the coordinates. The other 4 ships of the fleet followed in formation. They ran silent, using experimental stealth systems that bent sensor waves around them. To the rest of the galaxy, they were invisible ghosts moving through the darkness. The countdown reached 0. The neutral system of Kepler 442 became the most watched location in the galaxy. Council observers set up monitoring stations at a safe distance. News crews from every major species aimed their cameras at the coordinates. Everyone wanted to see what would happen. Everyone expected the same outcome. The Krelthani would win. The humans would die. That was how it always went. The Third Fleet arrived in perfect formation, a display of military precision and overwhelming force. 200 ships spread across space like a steel curtain. The dreadnoughts took point positions, their weapons already charging. Fleet Admiral Korvac scanned the area with every sensor at his disposal. Nothing. The system was empty. The humans had not shown up. Then the Reckoning dropped out of stealth, appearing as if materializing from nothing. It hung in space alone, dwarfing even the Krelthani dreadnoughts. 5 kilometers of dark metal and weapon ports. The Council observers gasped. The news crews zoomed in, unable to believe what they were seeing. The humans had built a monster. Admiral Chen opened a broadcast on all frequencies. Her voice was calm and cold. She did not shout or threaten. She simply stated facts. The Council had believed humanity would stay quiet. They believed fear would silence them. They believed wrong. The Krelthani had killed 15 billion people. They had destroyed colonies and homes. They had tried to break the human spirit. Now they would learn the cost of that mistake. Fleet Admiral Korvax responded with practiced arrogance. 1 ship against 200. The odds were laughable. He offered Chen 1 chance to surrender. Her crew would be taken prisoner and tried for piracy. The ship would be destroyed. If she refused, they would all die here and now. The choice was hers. He gave her 5 minutes to decide. Chen did not use the 5 minutes. Her response was to open fire. The Reckoning unleashed every weapon it had in one devastating salvo. Rail cannons fired slugs at relativistic speeds that punched through shields like they were not there. Missile pods released swarms of warheads that twisted and turned to avoid point defense. Energy weapons carved through armor plating. The attack was so sudden and so violent that the Krelthani fleet barely had time to react. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the impossible happened. The Reckoning did not die. Instead, it tore into the Third Fleet with terrifying efficiency. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Others lost power and drifted dead in space. The dreadnoughts focused their fire on the human ship, but it moved with surprising agility for its size, dodging and weaving through the barrage, and it kept shooting. The battle lasted 6 hours. 6 hours that changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about humanity. The Reckoning fought like nothing the Council had ever seen. It used tactics that seemed reckless but proved brutally effective. The ship would charge straight into formations, forcing the Krelthani vessels to scatter or risk collision. At close range, the human weapons were devastating. Rail cannons fired continuously, each shot crossing the distance in a fraction of a second. Krelthani shields, designed to deflect energy weapons, did nothing against solid projectiles moving at a percentage of light speed. The slugs tore through hulls and detonated inside ships, ripping them apart from within. Dozens of vessels died this way, their crews never knowing what hit them. The missile swarms proved equally deadly. Each warhead contained electronic warfare systems that confused targeting computers. The Krelthani point defense systems fired wildly, hitting their own ships as often as the missiles. When the warheads did connect, they released electromagnetic pulses that cascaded through entire formations. Ships lost power, drifted helpless, and became easy targets for follow-up strikes. Fleet Admiral Korvax tried every standard tactic in the Krelthani playbook. He ordered concentrated fire on single targets. He attempted flanking maneuvers. He even sacrificed smaller ships to create firing lanes for the dreadnoughts. Nothing worked. The Reckoning seemed to anticipate every move, responding with counter-tactics that turned Krelthani's strengths into weaknesses. The human ship was not invulnerable. It took damage, plenty of it. Armor plating was blown away in chunks. Secondary systems failed. Fires broke out in multiple sections. But the Reckoning kept fighting. Its crew worked with desperate efficiency, routing power, sealing breaches, and keeping the weapons firing. They had trained for 3 years for this moment. They would not stop. Admiral Chen stood on her bridge, calling out orders with calm precision. Her tactical officer fed her information on enemy positions. Her weapons officer coordinated the firing patterns. Her engineering chief kept the damaged systems running through sheer willpower and creative improvisation. They worked as one unit, every person knowing their role perfectly. The council observers watched in growing horror. This was not supposed to be possible. A single human ship was defeating the legendary Third Fleet. The news crews broadcast every moment to billions of viewers across the galaxy. Some species cheered quietly in their homes. Others felt fear creeping into their hearts. If the humans could do this, what did it mean for the rest of them? One of the Krelthani dreadnoughts made a fatal mistake. Its commander, desperate to prove his worth, ordered a direct assault on the Reckoning. The massive ship accelerated toward the human vessel, intending to use its superior size to ram and destroy. Chen saw the move coming. She waited until the last possible second, then fired every forward weapon simultaneously while executing a violent roll. The dreadnought could not maneuver quickly enough. Rail cannon rounds tore through its bridge. Missiles detonated along its spine. Energy weapons cut deep into its reactor core. The ship broke in half, spilling atmosphere and debris across thousands of kilometers. Thousands of Krelthani warriors died in an instant. The explosion lit up the battlefield like a second sun. Fleet Admiral Korvax finally understood what he was facing. This was not a desperate last stand. This was a calculated assault by warriors who had nothing left to lose. The humans were not trying to survive. They were trying to send a message written in fire and blood, and they were succeeding. The Third Fleet was being destroyed. Korvax made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He ordered a full retreat. The surviving ships of the Third Fleet broke formation and fled. Some did not make it, picked off by the Reckoning as they tried to escape. Others jumped to faster-than-light speeds with their shields still down, suffering damage in their panic. Of the 200 ships that entered the system, only 63 escaped. But Chen did not let them all go. She deliberately left one ship intact, a heavy cruiser that had wisely stayed at the edge of the battle. She opened a channel to its captain. Her face appeared on screens throughout the surviving Krelthani fleet. She looked tired, but her eyes burned with cold fire. She had a message to deliver, and every species in the galaxy needed to hear it. Chen spoke directly to the Krelthani captain, but her words were meant for the entire council. She told them that humanity remembered. Every colony burned, every life lost, every child who died screaming in the void. They remembered, and they would never forget. The council had believed that fear would make humanity submit. They had believed that overwhelming force would break the human spirit. They were wrong. Humanity had stayed quiet for 3 years, not out of fear but out of necessity. They needed time to build, to prepare, to plan. Now they were ready. The Reckoning was just the beginning. Chen told the Krelthani captain to return to his empire and tell them what he had seen. Tell them that the humans were coming. Tell them that every death would be answered. Tell them that silence was over. The surviving Krelthani ships jumped away, carrying their message of defeat. The Reckoning remained in the Kepler 4 and 42 system for another hour, making repairs and recovering what resources it could from the wreckage. The council observers watched, not daring to approach. News crews broadcast footage of the human ship moving slowly through the debris field of its enemies. Finally, the Reckoning activated its stealth systems and vanished. One moment it was there, solid and real. The next moment it was gone, as if it had never existed. But the wreckage remained. The burning hulls, the floating debris, the frozen bodies spinning in the void, all of it testified to what had happened here. The galaxy would never be the same. On the reservation worlds, the humans gathered around screens and watched the broadcasts in stunned silence. They had prayed for this moment but never truly believed it would come. Now they saw it with their own eyes. One human ship had destroyed a council fleet. It was impossible, but it had happened. For the first time in 3 years, they felt something other than despair. They felt hope. The Galactic Council chambers erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted over each other in a dozen languages. Some demanded immediate action against humanity. Others called for negotiations. A few quietly began calculating how to protect their own interests if the power balance had truly shifted. The news from Kepler 442 had shaken the foundation of galactic order. Ambassador Velcro stood frozen, watching the footage replay on every screen. The Third Fleet destroyed, the Reckoning vanishing into the darkness like a ghost. This was impossible. The humans should have been broken. Instead, they had built weapons that made Council technology look primitive. How had this happened? Where had they found the resources? Species that had participated in the destruction of Earth's colonies now begged the Krelthani Empire for protection. They feared human retaliation. They feared their own populations might see this as an opportunity to rebel. If humanity could stand against the Council, why not others? The carefully maintained order was beginning to crack. Fear spread like a virus. The Krelthani Emperor addressed the Council with barely controlled rage. The Third Fleet's defeat was a temporary setback, nothing more. The Empire would mobilize its entire armada. Over 1,000 warships would hunt down and destroy every human vessel. The species would be exterminated completely this time. No survivors, no mercy. The vote passed with a narrow majority, but not every species agreed. The Viridians, a younger civilization that had suffered their own pacification 30 years earlier, sent a secret transmission. It was encrypted with codes so complex that only the most advanced human computers could break them. The message contained detailed intelligence about Krelthani fleet movements, supply lines, and strategic weaknesses. The Viridians remembered their own defeat. They saw in humanity a chance for justice. Then came the second shock. The Reckoning was not alone. 4 more human warships emerged from deep space at strategic points across Krelthani territory. They were smaller than the flagship, but no less deadly. Each one had been built with the same desperate ingenuity and savage purpose. Each one carried a crew that had spent 3 years preparing for war. The ships had names that told their story: Retribution, Defiance, Remembrance, Fury, and the flagship, Reckoning. Together they formed a fleet that should not exist, but did. Admiral Chen had not spent 3 years building one ship. She had built an answer to the question the Council thought they had settled. What happens when you try to erase humanity? The human fleet began a campaign that military historians would study for generations. They did not target civilians or population centers. Every strike was aimed at military installations, supply depots, and shipyards. The attacks were surgical and devastating. Within 2 weeks, the Krelthani military infrastructure across 3 sectors was in ruins. The humans used tactics that the Council had never encountered. They appeared out of nowhere, struck with overwhelming force, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Their stealth technology was decades ahead of anything in the Council database. Their weapons seemed designed specifically to counter every defensive system the Krelthani possessed. Commander Brel, now promoted to Supreme Commander of all Krelthani forces, studied the pattern of attacks and realized something disturbing. The humans were not just destroying targets. They were sending a message. Every installation they hit had been involved in the original assault on Earth's colonies. Every officer they killed had blood on their hands. This was not random. This was justice. The Council fractured further. Some species began secret peace overtures to humanity, trying to distance themselves from the Krelthani Empire. Others doubled down on the war effort, fearing what would happen if the humans won. A few remained neutral, watching and waiting to see which side would prevail. The galaxy was dividing. The Viridians went further than just providing intelligence. Their representative, a young diplomat named Aerith, made a public statement that shocked everyone. She declared that her people supported humanity's right to defend itself. She called the destruction of Earth's colonies a crime against civilization. She offered sanctuary to human refugees and military support if needed. The Krelthani Emperor threatened the Viridians with the same fate as humanity. Aerith's response was broadcast across all channels. She stood before the Council and spoke with a quiet dignity that cut deeper than any weapon. Her people had also been pacified by the Council. They had been told to stay quiet. They had suffered and survived. Now they saw in humanity's struggle a chance to say that the old order was wrong. Other species began to whisper similar thoughts. If the Viridians could stand with humanity, perhaps they could too. The Council's power had always been based on fear and overwhelming force. But the humans had shown that even overwhelming force could be defeated. The impossible had happened once. Maybe it could happen again. Admiral Chen received the Viridian intelligence and immediately adapted her strategy. The Krelthani armada was gathering at a staging point near their homeworld. Over 1,000 ships, the largest military force ever assembled. The Emperor planned to use it to crush humanity in one final overwhelming assault. But the humans now knew exactly where the fleet was and when it would be vulnerable. Chen called a meeting with her fellow captains. They discussed the plan in detail. It was insane, desperate, and probably suicidal. They would attack the Krelthani homeworld itself. Not to destroy it, but to prove a point. To show that humanity could reach the heart of the Empire if they chose. To demonstrate that if the Krelthani wanted total war, they would get it. And they would lose. The captains voted. It was unanimous. They had come too far to stop now. They had lost too much to turn back. The human fleet set course for the Krelthani homeworld, preparing for the battle that would decide the fate of their species. Behind them across the galaxy, humans on the reservation worlds watched and waited. They could not fight, but they could hope. And hope was something they had not felt in 3 long years. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Krelthani home system. Before them lay the beating heart of the Empire, a world of gleaming cities and orbital platforms, shipyards that stretched for thousands of kilometers, defense stations that bristled with weapons, and between the humans and their target, the entire Krelthani armada, 1,000 ships arrayed in defensive formations that had been perfected over centuries. Supreme Commander Brel stood on the bridge of the Imperial flagship and watched the human ships appear on his sensors. 5 vessels against 1,000. The odds were absurd. Even with their advanced technology, the humans could not win this battle. But Brel felt no satisfaction. He had studied these humans for months now. They did not do anything without purpose. This was not a suicide mission. This was something else. Admiral Chen opened a broadcast to every ship in the system, every station and every receiver on the planet below. The Krelthani people deserved to see this. They deserved to know what their empire had done and what it had cost them. She began with a simple statement. 3 years ago, the Krelthani fleet destroyed Earth's colonies. 15 billion people died. Men, women, children. Entire families erased in hours. Chen played footage from the attacks. Not propaganda or edited clips, but raw recordings from the colonies as they died. Children crying for their parents. People burning in their homes. Ships exploding with families still aboard. The images were brutal and unforgiving. Billions of Krelthani citizens watched in horror. Many had never seen this footage. Their government had told them the humans were aggressors who needed to be stopped. Now they saw the truth. Then Chen made her point clear. The human fleet could destroy the Krelthani homeworld right now. Their weapons were powerful enough. Their targeting systems precise enough. They could turn the planet below into a burning wasteland, just as the Krelthani had done to Earth's colonies. But they would not. Because humanity was not like the Krelthani Empire. Humanity remembered what it meant to be civilized. The human fleet positioned its weapons on military targets only. Shipyards, defense platforms, command centers. Not cities, not civilian areas, not homes where families lived. Chen gave the Krelthani Emperor a choice. Surrender now and face justice for war crimes, or watch as his military infrastructure burned and his empire crumbled from within. She gave him 10 minutes to decide. The Emperor refused. He ordered the armada to attack. Pride and rage overruled wisdom. The 1,000 ships began their advance, weapons charging, shields at maximum. The human fleet did not move. They held position, waiting. Brel watched his sensors and felt cold certainty settle over him. The humans wanted the Krelthani to attack. They had planned for this. The battle began with the same fury as Kepler 442, but on a far larger scale. The human ships used every tactic they had learned, every weapon they possessed. 3 of the 5 vessels were destroyed within the first hour, their crews fighting to the last breath. But they took dozens of Krelthani ships with them. And the Reckoning and Defiance continued to fight with desperate skill. On the planet below, something unexpected happened. Young Krelthani military officers, those who had not participated in the original attack on Earth, began to question their orders. They watched the battle unfold. They saw the human ships dying but refusing to target civilian areas. They remembered Chen's broadcast and the footage of burning colonies. They realized they were fighting for an empire that had committed genocide. A group of ship captains made a decision that would echo through history. They refused to continue the attack. They broke formation and withdrew their ships from the battle. Others followed. Within minutes, a quarter of the Krelthani armada had stopped fighting. The Emperor screamed orders that were ignored. The military was fracturing before his eyes. Supreme Commander Brel made his own choice. He sent a message to his fellow commanders, bypassing the Emperor entirely. Enough blood had been spilled, enough destruction. The Empire had started this war with genocide. It would end it with honor, or what little honor remained. Brel ordered his ship to stand down. He requested a ceasefire and negotiations. The Emperor, isolated in his palace, refused to accept defeat. He tried to order the arrest of Brel and the other mutinous officers. But the military had made its decision. Junior officers stormed the palace and took the Emperor into custody. The reign of terror was over. The Krelthani Empire would face justice for its crimes. Admiral Chen received the ceasefire request aboard the burning wreck of the Reckoning. Her ship was dying, systems failing one by one. Half her crew was dead or wounded. But they had accomplished the impossible. They had brought the Krelthani Empire to its knees, not through genocide or terrorism, but through the simple act of refusing to stay quiet. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. For the first time in its history, the Council was forced to address war crimes committed by its own members. Representatives from dozens of species demanded accountability. The Viridians led the charge, supported by others who had suffered similar fates. Trials would be held. Those responsible would face justice. A new treaty was drafted, not one of submission and tribute, but one of mutual respect. Humanity would be recognized as a sovereign species with full rights. The survivors on the reservation worlds would be freed and allowed to rebuild. Reparations would be paid for the destroyed colonies. The process would take years, maybe decades, but it would happen. The galaxy learned a lesson that day, a lesson written in the wreckage of fleets and the blood of warriors. You could destroy a species' ships. You could take their worlds. You could kill their people, but you could not silence their voice. You could not break their spirit. And if you tried, they would rise from the ashes with fury and determination that no force in the galaxy could stop. Months later, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the memorial station, built at the location where Earth's moon once orbited. The moon itself was still scarred from the attacks, but life was returning. Humans were returning. She placed a wreath in the observation window, watching it float in the void. Behind her, other survivors did the same. Each wreath represented someone lost, someone remembered. Chen whispered words that only she could hear. She told them it was over. The galaxy knew now. They would never forget. Humanity had paid a terrible price for that knowledge, but it was done. The dead could rest. The living could rebuild. And the next time someone tried to make humanity stay quiet, they would remember what happened when silence finally broke. The camera pulled back from the memorial station, showing the construction yards beyond. New ships were being built. Not warships this time, but exploration vessels and colony ships. Humanity was looking outward again, not with fear or aggression, but with hope. The scars would remain forever. The memories would never fade. But humanity would endure. They always had. They always would.